Locked on Rockies. Ooh, Kryptonite.
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. Rock on Rockies fans. Welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast for today, the 14th day of July, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network in the year 2022. I'm Paul Holden, your Rockies fan extraordinaire, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies podcast. And we are live on YouTube right now. If you subscribe to us on YouTube, you can be part of the live chat because we're going to answer a couple of fan questions today. We'll follow up because I did do some reaching out after a question from yesterday. We're also going to dive into another series win against the Padres, especially at home. The Rockies continue to dominate the San Diego Padres at 20th and Blake. What does that mean for the Rockies and for the NL West? We'll talk about that. And we also got a interesting betting line that I got was sent today that I kind of got to call a little bit of hooey on. But we'll dive into that here in just a little bit. But before we do that, a reminder, this is the Locked On Rockies podcast where you can find your daily Colorado Rockies podcast. I am the host of the Locked On Rockies podcast, Paul Holden, your Rockies fan extraordinaire, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And today's episode of Locked On Rockies is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. And the game started early today and dragged. Oh boy, were the starting pitchers in this one not good whatsoever. Both Kyle Freeland and Blake Snell having issues for their clubs and frustrating issues as well, as Blake Snell continues to not be the pitcher the Padres were looking for, especially in Colorado. Things really fell apart, and it was great discipline for the Rockies there, scraping together 2 runs given off of walks, as Blake Snell, with 2 outs there, walking in multiple runners, a massive, massive turning point in the game for the Rockies, while the Padres were able to come back, and that game had wacky Coors Field game written all over it, which it still kind of embodied most of. The Rockies come alive and take down the Padres bullpen and win 3 out of 4 games against the Padres in this series. They continue to be a problem for the Padres. If the Padres don't figure out how to play Colorado, they are going to continue to be impacted by Colorado, making it harder for them to get where they want to be in terms of division rankings and in the wild card. It's going to be very, very difficult for this Padres team if they can't hang with the Rockies. And for the Rockies, it's an example, and it kind of shows you that this team can play against good teams. And this was a team that showed up. This was a team that didn't start the series with Chris Bryant. This was a team that didn't start the series with CJ Cron. Didn't have CJ Cron for over half the series. Didn't have Chris Bryant until today. And this was a team that still went out and took down the Padres in 3 of 4 at home and scoring a lot in the process. You lose a tough 1-run game there on Monday as the Rockies kind of fell behind early, and then the Padres kept putting on a late inning rally there in the 9th, putting some life into it. But then the Rockies go out and they handle business. The Padres are 50-41. I mean, that is and it's a complete flip. The Padres are supposed to be the much more intimidating, much more big of a force than the Rockies, but yet they just simply can't handle it, and they especially can't handle playing the Rockies at 20th and Blake. It's a big series, as Stephen Cross says in the live chat, and it's an important series, at least for morale and continuing to keep yourself in the conversation. That extended wild card is going to be interesting. The second half of the season is going to peter out to some interesting storylines, and the Rockies, while very far back, and again, have to do a lot more right and continue to play good, consistent ball, they still have a long way to go. However, the Orioles just rattled 10 wins in a row, and I would say the Mariners too, but I think the Mariners were overdue for this solid stretch. But the Rockies, after being swept by the Dodgers they come back, and what do? When they split the series with the Diamondbacks. No, in fact, they win the series against the Diamondbacks. 3 of 4 against the Diamondbacks, 3 of 4 against the Padres, winning 6 of 8 of your last games against the division, especially bouncing back from being swept. That's exactly what you need to do if you're the Rockies to continue to keep yourself relevant. You need to keep taking down Arizona and be moving up in the standings. Now, it's going to be very difficult to do, but remember, this is also a team going up against a Giants team that is struggling. The Giants now only 4 games above the Rockies for that third spot, and the Giants 5 games behind the Padres in that sense. So again, every time that the Rockies win divisional series, the weight is even bigger because these are all teams not only vying for a share of the division title or the division title if they can catch up to the Dodgers, which seems very unlikely, or their position in the wild card. What if you beat the Giants, the Diamondbacks, and the Padres? That helps you get into the wild card. Those games mean more when you can knock down those teams that you need to jump in those wild card standings if you jump them in your division standings. You can't jump them in the wild card standings if you don't jump them in the division standings. The Marlins, who are potentially in an instance where they could be there, 2 more wins than the Rockies this year. The Phillies with 5 more wins. The Cardinals pretty far out ahead, 7 wins there, but that's your only competition there in the Central. And you're going to get some opportunities against the Cardinals. The Padres now 9 games ahead of the Rockies, but if you can continue to beat the Padres, especially, it's the path is there. And Steven again nails it in the chat. Rockies are currently 6.5 games back of the third wild card spot. I don't want to get too excited because there's still a lot of baseball left, but if we win consistently, we have a shot. And that's been the whole saga of the 2022 Rockies. We look at stat lines, we look at potentials, and we look at some of these series, and this team should be more in the mix. But we've also seen this team go hitless. We've seen this team have awful pitching. This team has completely regressed. This team hasn't won. Have the Rockies won 5 games in a row this season? Have they gone on a stretch of that? It seems like the Rockies can't go more than 2 games in a row and then a loss, maybe even followed up by a series loss. If you want to have a shot at the wild card, if the Rockies want to remain relevant, you got to be splitting and winning every single series that you can from here on out. And that includes on the road against your division. And it's possible, it's doable. You're still the Dodgers might be a different story, but if you're seeing an opportunity to go and beat the Giants, if the Rockies move past the Giants, that's an even more interesting wrinkle there. 6.5 games is a lot of ground to cover, and the Rockies have a tremendously difficult schedule. But if they somehow power through this tremendously difficult schedule, if they get themselves in a position, or, if everything goes well, which most likely it won't, it's going to be a Rockies team that went through the grinder to get into that wild card position. And while that game today against the Padres started ugly, the Rockies were able to grind out a pretty darn good win. Disciplined approaches at the dish today to get the crucial walks against a good pitcher, a pitcher that had struck out a ton of people in his past 11 innings. The Rockies are able to go out there, draw the walks, take advantage of him being off his game, and back up their pitcher. Every time Kyle Freeland stumbled, the Rockies were able to pick him back up. And even though Kyle Freeland couldn't reciprocate, the bullpen had his back. This was it's a classic cliche thing. But this series and this win is a gutsy win for the Rockies, and it does show that the team has more life than people probably want to give them credit for, and probably than we thought. I think, again, with Chris Bryant being the everyday factor, with CJ Cron being a consistently huge threat the entire season, with the defense getting better, we're starting to see the what ifs of the Rockies pop up again, because shouldn't be too surprising when some of this stuff is good. But again, in the big picture and in comparison to other teams, they still have the struggle stacking up. But this is, again, a Rockies team that has handled business against the Padres. This is a Rockies team that and the Padres, again, are a 50-win team right now. 50-win team. I mean, that is a massive, massive scenario. I mean, this is an absolutely important thing to keep note of. These are two. Let's look at the series here for against in the total so far. 11 games for the Rockies and the Padres this year. The Rockies have won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games against the Padres this year out of 11. Is that just home? No, this is the regular season series. The Rockies lead the regular season series against the second place in the NL West Padres 8-3. That's a statement. That's saying something. That shows that this team does have talent to compete with some of these great teams, but the consistency has always been the issue. And unfortunately, it is also gives the front office the firepower to remind us, oh, this is why we're not doing anything. This is why we're not sitting back. It's just the Rockies are playing with confidence right now. You're seeing a Rockies team that has more energy, and you're seeing a Rockies team that went through a division ringer of a grinder of 3 series against the division. The Rockies have only been playing division ball for a solid stretch now. And of course, you hate being swept by the Dodgers, but they're the freaking Dodgers. What are you going to do about it? You're in the last time you played the Dodgers, you took 2 or 3 from them. You took 2 or 3 against the Diamondbacks. This stretch of division baseball easily could have spelled doom for the Rockies. It really should have. With the way the team was going into this divisional stretch of baseball, this could have been the nail in the coffin because it was bad. It was looking bad for the Rockies there in terms of energy, in terms of optimism. But to go out here and let me see if I can do the quick crunch here of the division wins. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games that they have won out of this division stretch. And what was that? 16 games against the division they just wrapped up playing against? You're going to tell me you're not going to be happy with a 10-6 record against the NL West and coming off and with the cherry on top of 2 back-to-back series wins, especially one where you took down the Padres again? There is a cause for optimism, but Steven nailed it. Let's remember to keep our foot on the brake. The Rockies have a long way to go. They have a lot of baseball left, including a lot of baseball on the road. But we are seeing good things from the Rockies, and we'll continue to dive into this and kind of go into a little bit more. Want to follow up on a couple of things that we talked about yesterday and one thing that I saw as well. But before we do that, got to tell you about some of the great folks that make this show possible, and that includes BlueNile.com. Whether you're ready to pop the question or you're celebrating a milestone moment, find jewelry as unique as your favorite person with the modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. Blue Nile has simple online tools that let you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as setting style. Blue Nile's bench jewelers will then handcraft the perfect engagement ring, and each ring is one of a kind. And guess what? Those jewelers are also available on hand for you to ask your questions, to dive into, to make sure that you're picking the right piece for your favorite person 24/7. Available on the phone or via the chat, Blue Nile's jewelry experts are going to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On Rockies listeners get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement. Use code Locked On. That's code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever piece. Go to BlueNile.com today. So before we dive in too much more, I think we had a good conversation and about what that series means for the Rockies, what this good baseball stretch against the division means for the Rockies. It's all good. Still a ton more work to do, and I think the Rockies would probably say the same as well. We had a couple questions that I wanted to get an answer for yesterday in the podcast. I was asked about the Rockies letting Colton Welker be DFA'd. We also, until today, this was going to be a whole segment that I had on that I was going to do for today about Eleris Montero. But I reached out to Lindsey Crosby and I said, of the host of Locked On MLB Prospects, so make sure that you're checking that out. You all saw him here on the podcast last week. So here's what he said. I said, what does, was letting Colton Welker go a mistake for the Rockies, and is the team mishandling the Montero promotion? So this is what Lindsey said. Welker didn't look great in the bigs last year and after the suspension, but I thought it was odd they DFA'd him instead of using the 60-day IL to clear the 40-man roster spot. It's probably we've had enough of this kid and they just wanted to wipe their hands clean of him, which I get. Don't necessarily think I would have done that yet, but I get it. It hasn't come back to bite them yet because he won't play again until next year for San Fran, but I wouldn't have done it. So there's the answer there from our big prospect guy. It did seem like it was a little quick to pull the trigger. I feel like he deserved a little bit more time. And then he said, as far as Montero, I wouldn't have him up if he couldn't play every day. And he scuffled to the point where I don't know if keeping him at the big league level and letting him start only 3 times in the month of July is any help at all. Why have him up just to sit on the bench? Send him back down and let him play every day. And the Rockies did, in fact, send Eleris Montero down to AAA again today to bring Chris Bryant back from the paternity list. So we were going to talk about that because, yes, the Rockies absolutely mishandled bringing Montero up. There was no reason, especially with the fact that they had CJ Cron out of the lineup, they had Chris Bryant out of the lineup. They could have found different places to make sure that Montero could have gotten some consistent at-bats. So let's hope the next time that Montero is up here for the Rockies, he's actually going to be able to contribute, because we've seen this before, and there's a perfect example of why the Rockies need to get off their duffs and trust their prospects sometime, sitting at second base right now, who has been absolutely such a stud. Brendan Rodgers, we talked about him a ton in the offseason, and again, he is making impacts for the Rockies. Talk about another person that is making an impact for the club and helping this club play a more confident game. A confident Brendan Rodgers is big time, especially, I think, for the defensive mindset of this team and the offense. This is a wonderful line again for Brendan Rodgers today. 3 at-bats, he gets 2 walks, gets the hit, gets a run. He's getting on base. He's really seeing the ball well. He's turned his season completely around, and he's being that threat that we knew he could be this season. Brendan Rodgers easily on my list of most exciting Rockies. And it's, again, I want to be super excited. I want to just scream from the mountaintops after 2 back-to-back series wins against the division and all this stuff about good things to enjoy about the Rockies. But we can't ignore the pitfalls that we've seen from this team. But this is the stretches you need to go on. This is what you need to do against the division. And then the next step, steal some of these 1-run games. Get the sweeps instead of get that last run against the Padres in the 9th and get the sweep in this one. That type of stuff is going to have to happen if the Rockies are going to want to get to where they want to be in terms of the postseason. And again, there are good pieces, but it also doesn't mean all the success still doesn't mean you should shut the door on the trade deadline. We all know what's going to happen at the deadline for the Rockies. I like, none of you are going to be surprised if the Rockies do nothing, right? I mean, we can be frustrated, we can vent it, but at the end of the day, I am not sitting here thinking the Rockies are going to do anything at the deadline. They should do something at the deadline. I wholeheartedly believe they should do something at the deadline. But we know from history, we know from what Danielle Allentuck was reporting yesterday and what we saw there, that's really not the mindset of this front office. But again, does this team really have enough? And I'm still not sure about that. But we saw this team play complete baseball. And when they took step backs, or when they weren't being successful in some areas, they were able to pick themselves back up. And again, if the starting pitching can just, that's going to be the ultimate big factor going forward. Can this starting pitching really turn things up and be as dominant as we know some of these players can be? Wanted to talk about an interesting betting line that I was sent today, but before we do that, let's talk about betting at betonline.net. Betonline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all of the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including all the action for Major League Baseball, both regular season and throughout the postseason. Of course, we're already talking postseason baseball. It's what we do. It's sports podcasting. When else? When aren't we talking about the playoffs? BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And BetOnline.net remains the best spot. Yes, folks, the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website. That's BetOnline.net today, or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action at BetOnline, where the game starts. So I was sent this betting line here, and it was from our friends at BetOnline, and this is what I was sent. After 3 seasons with no in-season managerial firings, there have already been 3 in 2022 with Joe Maddon, Joe Girardi, and Charlie Montoyo. Who could be next? BetOnline sends us these odds. Next MLB manager fired: Mark Kotsay plus 350, Dave Ross plus 450, Davey Martinez at plus 500. And who is listed right after that at plus 550 is Bud Black. And I was shocked. This, folks, avoid that bet with the largest stick that you could. If Bud Black got fired mid-season, especially by this team, whew, you would be happy to make that money, sure, but you would be taking the biggest gamble. There is just absolutely no way, shape, or form that I think Bud Black is anywhere close to on the hot seat. The Rockies love Bud Black. The broadcast loves Bud Black. Bud Black loves the Rockies. They have, if they wanted to make moves, there would have already been conversations about Bud Black and not extending Bud Black, as we've seen from the Rockies. There is just absolutely no way that I would think that Bud Black has more of a chance of being fired than Tony La Russa, for example, or maybe even Don Mattingly there of the Marlins. This was one I was just kind of like, huh? You might have thoughts about Bud Black, but you definitely can't sit there and say that you think the Rockies are going to move on from Bud Black. That's for sure, because that is simply something they are not going to do. So that was something interesting, I thought. But let's see here. I mean, what else to say about this one, guys, gals, non-binary pals? Everyone who loves Rockies baseball has to be feeling good right now. I mean, you just go through the lineup today. Connor Joe gets 3 walks, an RBI, also picks up a run off of that. Jose Iglesias continues to swing the bat incredibly well, picking up multiple RBIs. That's really what we should finish up talking about. Is, wow, Jose Iglesias, absolute behemoth, an absolute threat, an absolute Padres killer there. And it just, that, when you're talking about a move the Rockies should make, as great as Iglesias has been, him doing this type of stuff right before the deadline, come on now. You got your future. You know you're not committing long term. That's a player you got to go let him get a chance to go play on a contender if things don't go well for the Rockies. Because, hey, they got the Pirates coming up, and they haven't played the Pirates very good. But how much of an impact is having Chris Bryant against a team like the Pirates going to be for the Rockies here? We're going to do another crossover with Locked On Pirates again and talk about that as well. But man, it's just lots to like about the series, lots of stuff to also be kind of like, yee. But again, good, solid stretch of baseball for the Rockies against the division, and with the worst stretch being the sweep against the being swept by the Dodgers, going out and winning a bunch of series, winning back-to-back series, especially after being swept and taking a series against the Diamondbacks and taking a series against the Dodgers even before that. The Rockies lose one series after they with 16 games, I believe, or basically, what was it? 1, 2, 3, for 5 straight series against the division. You will take 4 series wins to that 1 loss any day of the week. And folks, we're going to keep talking about the Rockies right here on Locked On Rockies any day of the week. Well, any weekday, usually, unless we have some fun on the weekends. So make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Rockies on YouTube. We're free and streaming on your favorite streaming service as well. But we're going to wrap things up for today. We will be back in action with more Locked On Rockies action tomorrow, so don't miss out on that. And folks, make sure you go make Locked On MLB Prospects your second listen of the day. No better place to go to stay up to date with the world of MLB prospects than there. And you got your Colorado sports covered with the Locked On Avalanche, Locked On Broncos, Locked On Nuggets podcast, as well as us here at the Locked On Rockies podcast. Follow us on Twitter at LO Rockies and follow me, Paul Holden, at Paul Holden 33. And until next time, I'm Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Rockies podcast.